Welcome everyone to episode 79 of the Racing Line podcast. It's just Joey and I tonight. Anthony is MIA, working out in his garage, apparently looking after his son. But Joe, mate, Monaco Grand Prix, how good was it?
Mate, well, firstly, hey, going, mate. Hope you had a good week.
You too.
Really, I think we'll delve into it, but it's probably got to be one of the better weekends I can remember in a long time, especially coming from a place like Monaco. I think you couldn't have asked for a more interesting Q3 in qualifying.
Oof.
Um,
Even
and then,
Q1 and Q2 were excellent.
yeah, I think there was a few factors that made it a particularly great qualifying. And then I think the race, from the start, it was interesting, but I think the rain and a few strategy calls sort of spiced it up a little bit more. I mean, Verstappen won, but I still think the path to victory was a lot less certain than it might have looked to people if they hadn't watched the race.
Hmm.
And overall, I think it was a little bit fortuitous for him, but also just the fact that they made all the right calls at all the right times, like you would expect a championship team to really do. Not unfortunately, but just
Hmm.
in that situation, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think this weekend kind of reiterated how good Monaco can be, especially qualifying. Like for me, there is no better qualifying session on the calendar. Like Australia was awesome, and I think that was due to the fact that they were able to do multiple runs on the same set of tires. So cars were out on track all the time. But this just there's something about this track, and everyone complains that there's no passing, there's no, all that sort of stuff in the race. But quali alone, I think, is worth having it on the track, on the calendar.
I th-
Sorry.
I think there's something to be said about drivers knowing that their finishing position can be so um, in, intrinsically linked to their qualifying. Whereas in other tracks, you sort of have a bit more of a chance to race through the field and and pull off some overtakes. Where Monaco is such a narrow track, and it gets narrower as the cars get wider.
Mm.
Um, that you really do need to pull out all the stops to get a good qualifying, and we saw it. Like we saw in especially at the end of that Q3, times were falling, but at the same time, all the drivers were saying they were had to take more and more and more risk
Mm.
to achieve that time. And even I think Max had a pretty scary moment on his flying lap as well, which is really what you want to like at a track like that where it is totally balls to the wall. Um, there was actually an interesting observation I made from watching that whole weekend, and
Mm.
I watched the whole Formula E weekend that was there a couple of weeks back.
Yep.
Um, sort of, I was excited to see them cars on the big track on the normal layout. And what I took from this weekend is there is nothing that those cars can do that hold a flame to anything that looks as
No.
good as the spectacle that Formula One really creates around that track. What were your takeaways from qualifying? I thought, Checo crashing in Q1, disastrous for him. Totally destroyed his weekend. From there, he never in the race was able to find a clear spot, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, what did you take from it?
Well, I think I'm just looking at the timings now. The top 8 cars in quali were separated by 6 tenths.
Yeah,
Now, that's phenomenal considering the quality of car between those, 6 to 8 cars. Um, 6 tenths is nothing. I know it's a smaller track, and then the Red Bull's probably not eking out as much performance because of the way the track's laid out. But 6 tenths that's the kind of stuff we want to see week in, week out. And hopefully moving forward, with as these teams get on top of the regulations, we see that more often. But there were a couple of things. The race, Fernando and Aston Martin, I think they maximized whatever they could this weekend. Even without the pit stop stuff up, I
blunder.
don't I don't think they would have won the race. I think it would have been closer. I think Max just had too much pace. And I think this weekend we saw Max on a different level. Like just that he was put, what did it was 20 something seconds on Fernando in the dry running. Like that is insane around a track like Monaco. Um, so and then you got the juxtaposition of Checo down in 16th, 15th for the whole race. I think it just showed. I've been saying it since day one. Everyone's been talking about Checo mounting a championship charge. Checo always starts a season off really well, but he can't be consistent enough in that Red Bull. What do you think?
I think what you're saying has a lot of validity to it, especially after this weekend. I do think that I don't want to say too much after just one weekend, but it really has been more than just one weekend. Like we saw the crash in qualifying at Albert Park. There was this one. I think there's another one that is escaping me as well. Was it Miami? That was Leclerc. But there was another one as well. I think like these mistakes are what are going to cost him dearly, especially when you look at the championship and you see how close Fernando is to him with no race wins, but just pure consistency. And I suppose the problem that he has on a track like Monaco is you can have a great car like he's had all year, but there's nowhere to pass. And then there was even a few mistakes he made, like he ran into the back of a few cars, got very impatient. I suppose that was all he could do, but like that's a costly mistake. Not even setting a banker lap, you know what I mean? Like first corner of your first flying lap and going in there. So like it was, even they were saying totally different to Albon's crash there in free practice, because in Albon's one, I think he'd entered the corner maybe 4Ks too fast, but they were saying like Checo's one was over 10Ks too fast. So, that's going to hurt him. No points for that race. And I think there was like a few other Norris's crash in qualifying I thought was a bit unfortunate, but and to be honest, it didn't really hurt him that much because he had set a pretty good time. So it stopped him from competing in Q3, or was it in Q3?
No, it happened in Q2, but he got through to Q3.
That's right. Yeah, so he wasn't able to compete in Q3, but and they were and that's the thing, they were looking during practice like a pretty handy car, that McLaren. So I don't know if he could have made it a roadblock for the rest of the for the race, but he sort of never gave himself the chance to push for the higher positions.
They were kind of in no man's land all race. They were
the best of the rest.
They were, 10 seconds, whatever it was, behind whoever it was in front of Lando. But then Oscar was like 10, 15 seconds ahead of Bottas by the end. So they were kind of like just with each other. And I was impressed with Oscar's pace. And when you look at, and I know on the chat today we were saying, are we rewarding someone just doing their job? I think Anthony said it by praising Oscar.
Of course, Anthony said that.
Typical Aussie hate from him. But when you look at the other two rookies on the grid, Sargent didn't have a good weekend, and De Vries was probably the slowest car on track at one point. So I
thought De Vries had probably his best weekend in terms of qualifying and race pace, to be honest, for the car that he had. But Piastri was definitely he looked like he belonged. Yep. He was able to race away from cars, didn't make any mistakes. I think it didn't hurt that the car seemed to be working around there as well. That McLaren. So all boxes checked. But to leave Monaco with points in those precarious conditions as well, I thought was really good. And then when you look at someone like Stroll, and for me, I think the only driver I thought looked. It wasn't even amateur, but it was looked so sort of foolish. Was just how he was. How he went out from making some
Mm,
ridiculous attempts at passing like then to juxtapose it to Piastri. I thought he just looked
yeah.
really confident. He got ahead of Norris for a bit.
Mm.
The pit strategy sort of didn't help him out, but leave Monaco with a point. Great result for him.
I think Oscar's stocks are rising because he is able to hang on to the back of Lando quite closely in his first year, considering Lando's been there, 5 years now?
Yeah.
I think it's a really good start to his Formula One career. I did want to say I've been pretty harsh on Ocon this season,
You have been.
and Alpine. Gasly looked okay. He was not on the same level as Ocon. Ocon, mate, he was a roadblock for Science, and to the point where Science was getting frustrated and tried to make a silly move and essentially ruined his own race.
Yeah.
So I have to give props to Ocon there. He's given himself a bit of a stay of execution, I think, after today's performance.
He has some really good moments, Ocon, and I think he really has to try and sort of level out his highs and his lows. I thought Alpine as a team made a massive step this weekend. They've probably given themselves space from McLaren now,
100%.
to really kick on going forward and not really worry about what's behind them. Great double points finish, qualified both in the 10. The car probably isn't as fast as some of those other cars, but that was a great qualifying lap by Ocon. And like I said, like qualifying there is so important. He gave himself the best opportunity to, get the result. And then when everything sort of went to hell with when the rain came in, and he had already done that first stop as well, sort of really maximized it. Didn't make any. I don't think I saw him make any mistakes under the in the wet either. Never even looked. I don't even think he really ever had a moment where he lost traction. So he was really safe, really consistent, and that's a massive 15 points for Alpine. Great podium for him. Especially after what came out, or we discussed in the last pod about what Laurent Rossi said. I think that's sort of the shot in the arm that Alpine as a team probably have been looking for and need. And I think Mercedes probably all in all came away with the most points out of all the other teams, best of the rest. But I think Alpine can probably take the most from that race, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm still Gasly's still settling in, obviously, but
even he during the race, there was moments he looked really good. He got stuck in traffic, but there was even he was on the hards, and for some reason they pitted him before the rain came, but not too far before the rain came. And I thought, they'll be playing the same strategy as what Alonso's playing, and then they sort of just folded on that idea. And I think they sort of missed an opportunity there. And I don't know how his tyre was looking, but he was pretty certain that he had a little bit more time in him. But that's how it goes. So yeah, he didn't I think he finished 7th, but even he had a sort of a roll of the dice and looked better than they've looked all year up to now.
Yeah, I think
So
they just
I was happy for them.
They just need to be consistent from here on in, because they're a constructor, and they need to start performing like a constructor.
They need to finish races, which is what they both did. And podiums is great, but if they're aiming for 5th spot, try and get around 5th and then snag the occasional podium. I think that will keep the big bosses happy enough. And I was actually thinking about during the race, when I look at Aston Martin, they've got probably the best. Alonso's doing amazing things with that car, but in terms of second driver strength, they're probably the worst of that big four. And I don't know if it's going to come back to haunt them, because they're Mercedes is already ahead of him in the championship. I don't think Alpine can reach him with the pace that Alonso's showing. Like if he can bag a minimum of what he's averaging, 16 points a race, I don't think Alpine's going to catch him. But in terms of how the season wears on and going into next season, I think they're the team that really has to have a hard think about their driver lineup going forward, because Ocon has showed us he can make a few silly moves, and when it's off, it's off. But also when it's on, he can stitch it together.
Well, I guess that kind of leads me to my next thing. Because I agree. I think Aston Martin have all these aspirations of challenging for titles, especially now, and we'll get into it maybe with the Honda deal. But the rumors this week, and I don't necessarily think the rumors are true about the Lewis to Ferrari for 75 mil, but I guess there's no smoke without fire. So Lewis is clearly having conversations about his contract.
I think he's having conversation about his future, not his contract, like just about his future in the sport. I think would be more.
But I also think Ferrari could potentially be looking at changing that lineup moving forward, which is why maybe we're getting these rumors. Maybe it's not so much to do with Lewis. So moving forward, like, could you see a Carlos Sainz at Alpine, not at Alpine, at Aston Martin to partner Alonso in the future? I don't know. I think Carlos is on his way out, or they won't be extending Carlos moving forward.
Why they wouldn't extend Carlos, I would be flabbergasted if it was from their side, to be honest. Like I'm just looking at the driver market, and this is including like Lewis at Mercedes. It's including Carlos. If I'm Ferrari, your main problem isn't your drivers, and I think it's the same thing I was saying about McLaren last year. Your main problem is the car that you've developed. Once you've sorted that out, and then I would worry about my driver pairing. But I feel like both those drivers are sort of maximizing the package. Yeah, they're making mistakes, but I feel like the car is exacerbating those problems because it seems to be so flimsy. Lewis to Ferrari makes no sense to me.
No. I'm with you.
Like if Lewis is going anywhere, he's going to Red Bull or he's quitting. Like I don't like the Ferrari isn't that much of a better car than the Mercedes. Like, and that's the long and short of it. Mercedes is still second in the championship. And I don't think either team has really come close to mounting a race, a good go at winning a race this year. But I would put all my money on Mercedes getting that car sorted before the end of the year rather than Ferrari.
100%. I just think, as I said, I don't think it's coming from Lewis or Mercedes that Ferrari's approached him. I just think Ferrari are potentially starting to have those conversations about their lineup. And I'm with you. I don't think the drivers are the issue. I just think it's typical Ferrari to change things up when it's not working. And
yeah, you could be right. I just there are so many other things I feel like they have to get on top of before they start changing drivers. I could see Carlos going to Aston Martin though. Like on his own terms, I can see that. But not him getting dropped. I feel like he could just walk away if whenever his contract is up. I don't know when his contract's up though, to be honest.
I think it's end of next year.
Yeah, so I don't know if they would let him walk before end of next year. They've got some time. Ferrari's got some time to sort their shit out. But and the other thing with Aston Martin is if everyone stays put, I don't know who they bring in, because I don't think the options that are left, except maybe Albon, I would sort of risk bringing into that seat over what Stroll is offering at the moment. Like we know Norris isn't moving, we know Piastri isn't moving. Sonoda maybe with the new Honda news, but I don't think as a driver he's ready for that role. And I don't think there are any other drivers on the grid who I would actively promote to that role. Thinking off the top of my head.
Well, I think DR could do a job there, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't doubt he could do a job there, but I don't see him
No.
going there after reconciling with Red Bull. Maybe Checo will go there and DR will get his old seat back.
Oofed. That'd actually be interesting.
That would be the only one that I think would make sense.
That's
Because
interesting.
Checo's stock has still never been higher, and the Aston Martin team he has a history with,
It's
recent
true.
history, and the car's never been better either, to be honest. So if anything was, but I would still say as well, you bring in a driver like DR, Checo, even Bottas, but I don't see Bottas moving either. I feel like they need a driver who's going to challenge for those scrap points that Stroll, like the last 3 races, Stroll has looked so far from Alonso. It's like he's driving a different car.
There's no way. Like, I know, hypothetically, this all sounds great, and if it was any other team, Stroll would be gone, but he's not going anywhere.
I don't think it's as cut and dry as that, because Aston Martin still answer to stock shareholders, and it's not even that. I feel like if you have real aspirations of being world champions, and that's what it comes down to, real aspirations of being world champions. And I've been the biggest Stroll defender on this podcast, I think, as well. He's not the piece that you need in that second driver role. And he's also not the piece you're going to need when Alonso decides to walk away. So if he's neither of those pieces, the hard reality is that he doesn't really, like, that seat is too valuable for a team with aspirations of Aston Martin. We've seen them now making the decision to go independent on an engine provider as well. So they're gearing up to be an independent team, like a totally independent team, which is a great move, ballsy move. I have huge respect for that decision. But
It's
also,
a win-win.
I think it's a great decision. I think it's great for the sport as well to have all your big teams, with different suppliers. But with those, aspirations, I feel like if Stroll was there was still to be there at that time, it would be a bit of a contradiction. What's the word? Nepotism.
Yeah.
It'd be a bit of nepotism. So how the cookie crumbles in the future, I don't know. But I would expect Papa Stroll to have a chat with his son and say, your time is up. You've been there for, how long has he been there for? He has to have been there for at least nearly 7 years.
He was at Williams
For about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And then he was at
then he went to Racing Point
for 2 years, and he's been at Aston for 2 years. I reckon about 6 or 7 years. I'm going to look it up now while you present me the next question.
Well, talking about Honda returning and the perennial in and outers, which are Honda. So we're going to have in 2026 Audi with Sauber. You're going to have Mercedes. You're going to have Ford and Red Bull partnering. Honda, Ferrari. I think I counted today 6 powertrains.
This is his 7th year.
Yeah, he needs to go. I've been saying it from day one, but 6 powertrains in 2026.
Yeah.
What does that, and Alpine's the other one, obviously, Renault. What does that mean for McLaren, Williams, and Haas moving forward?
Well, I heard something interesting today that I haven't been able to clarify, so I don't know if it was a clickbait title, but it made sense. I heard that Alfa Romeo are positioning themselves to be a sponsor on
title
Haas.
Sponsor. Yeah, I saw that.
Haas.
Yeah.
I didn't confirm it because I forgot about it again. But it would imply to me that Ferrari is that Haas is going to keep their Ferrari partnership going, which makes sense because they pretty much moved next door to Ferrari. That's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
For the other teams,
Williams and
McLaren partner with who you think is going to be the best of those teams. I would like to see Williams get that Honda relationship going again, to be honest, for nostalgia's sake. Realistically, I don't really care though. Like for Williams and McLaren, I think as long as they're on the grid, and performing, I would say Williams is not leaving from Mercedes at any time soon, especially now with Vowles as the team principal. I think his connection to Mercedes is too strong. It's just too easy for him, in terms of deals and all that kind of stuff. I think McLaren is going to be the interesting one because their aspirations are to be a championship contender. And I find it so sort of interesting that Aston Martin's pulled the plug, sort of pulled the pin on their own engine manufacturer before McLaren could. I think it has shown a little bit of a change in the hierarchy. To be honest with you, and that's no sort of dig at McLaren, even though it's definitely shows sort of the intent of Aston Martin. But they've probably missed the boat now. I really think they've missed that boat.
And you would expect Sauber to be stronger with Audi backing. You would expect Honda to have all their IP from the existing power unit, so that's probably going to be pretty strong straight off the bat. You would expect Red Bull to continue on the same trajectory they're on now, or at least the performance will be similar. Ferrari's Ferrari, who knows? And Mercedes are only just going to get better. I don't know. Like, does this turn McLaren into bottom of the middle pack?
It depends how good whoever's engine. I think at the end of that, it depends on how good whoever's engine they choose is. But what it doesn't give them is the ability to package a car around the engine, which we've seen at the start of these eras is massive. How it plays out, I don't know. Like, thinking about it, they might want to. There are so many options for them that they can take, but it's going to be interesting, like whoever they choose, because you're always going to be playing second fiddle from now on. And then we've also seen how quickly a relationship can sour when the team who's buying engines is performing better than the team who makes the engines, in the case of Red Bull and Renault. So I would say it would make the most sense for them to position themselves with Audi. But at the same time, Audi has zero track record in terms of making these engines. So I have no idea, but I do think they've definitely missed the boat in terms of getting themselves a manufacturer. Because that Honda one, I heard Honda was positioning themselves to come back with another team in 2026, and I honestly thought it was going to be McLaren. I thought they could have built that, or sort of mended that bridge, and it would have suited both teams with the recent success of Honda. So for that to then go to Aston Martin, good on Aston Martin for securing that. But I don't know where I don't know where it leaves McLaren. I would guess that McLaren as a race-winning organization consistently is done.
Yeah,
I think the writing's been on the wall for a minute as well.
Yeah, it seems a bit doom and gloom, but I guess look at Aston this year. But my concern is the fact that there's going to be so many constructors moving forward that they will get left behind.
I don't think they'll all stay. That's the other thing. One of them always leaves. Once whoever starts the worst usually pulls the plug pretty quick. you know?
Well, mate, we've got Spain next week. I'm
Yeah.
excited for a traditional track, even though Spain isn't the most exciting, but they've gotten rid of the final chicane, which I think
Yeah.
will make that back straight a little bit more conducive to some overtaking.
Yeah.
Um, any predictions or anything you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to. I want to see how this new Mercedes
Mm,
aero package works on a real track. I would have liked to see that a comparison between the two cars at this track, because I think them being so close in qualifying at a track that you probably wouldn't have expected them to with the old package
mm,
might show an a bit of an upgrade on the package itself. But we're going to a traditional track now.
the one they all know the best.
Yeah, they all know, and that's I think this is as well probably hurt them at Monaco, was that the track is such a weird track to set up for.
Yeah.
So they're going back to a track that they all know well. I want to see, like, I think the car looks great. I love the aero package. It looks traditional. It's different to the Red Bull, yet similar.
Mm.
It's sort of like it's very much an in between the Ferrari and the Red Bull. So it's going to be interesting to see how it performs against the Red Bull Mercedes of Aston Martin. But I think it can only get better. But I think for me, that's the only real question of what can change in this season. Really, it's still a bit of an unknown. So I'm interested to see how that goes, because there was some like significant changes to that car, even like suspension mounting points and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, so it's a proper I saw a side by side, like a split in the middle of the two cars, and it is massive changes. Like the rear wing is different. You've got the mounting points for the suspension is different. Obviously, the side pods are different, but it's more than just bolting side pods on. It's a whole, proper upgrade.
Yeah, I guess Mercedes as an organization now, like I know they went down that design philosophy, but moving forward, they know what direction not to take. So they've eliminated, I guess, one whole aerodynamic philosophy. So I foresee them next year coming with a pretty strong car at the latest. I would imagine they'll be doing a lot of testing for the rest of this year. But if
Well,
any
you would
team,
imagine. Sorry, keep going. Sorry.
I was going to say, if any team's going to catch up to Red Bull, I think it is going to be Mercedes, which
Well,
would be nice.
This is really sort of this car now is going to be the platform for building onto next year anyway. It's funny, like it was very much, they have finally given us validation that yep, that old car, whatever their thoughts about the car was initially, it is done. It was a failure. They're moving on from it. I am interested to see if they can get a win by the end of the year now, because I all of a sudden, as weird as this sounds, now that they've changed their philosophy, for me, they are the team on the grid who's going to snag a win. Because like even yesterday, they had no right finishing fourth and fifth, no right at all.
Yeah.
So to snag those points, to now be sitting second in the championship, ahead of Aston Martin, ahead of Ferrari. Yeah, their season has been a bit of a failure. But so then look at the results, look at the points they've got. They're nowhere near Red Bull, but they're still best of the rest.
Ooh.
So
when you think back to last year, at this point, I think Ferrari was still ahead in the championship.
yeah, Ferrari had a few wins by this time. That's probably had 3 wins by this point. Not 3, maybe 2.
And I'm not saying that Mercedes is going to go now and start winning all the races like Red Bull did last year, but I think, well, I'm hoping more so than anything that moving forward that we get a bit more closer racing. We get not only Lewis and Max, but George and Max. I want to see George running up the front and see where he's actually at. Because I think on your average weekend where the car's not performing, George and Lewis are close, but where the car is performing, and I feel that Lewis can still eke out a little bit more performance out of it than George. So I want to see George now push on, move up.
Yeah.
because we know how good he can be. We saw him in Formula 2, how good he was in the Williams. Now I want to see him go in the Mercedes.
Yeah, 100%. I
But
think of all the things to look forward to coming this week and towards the end of the season, this is going to be, or this is what I'm looking forward to most. And what you said, I think out of the four team pairings, I think they're the closest. They probably push themselves the most just by how competitive that, like, there isn't really a number one in that team at the moment, which is fantastic for them. And if that car can get sorted out, like, I think Red Bull, I think Aston, I think Ferrari will all have to sort of make really smart decisions about their driver pairings, because if with a good car, Max is going to be there, but you would throw Lewis and George straight to into that top pecking order over the other guys, which is, as funny as it sounds, what I really want to see is Mercedes back at the top. I have the most faith in them as an organization. I think I made that abundantly clear last year.
yeah, I'm the same. And I think this is what I was saying, I think at the start of the year or end of last year, that if a team does start challenging Red Bull, is Checo the guy to stay up there with the big guns consistently? I think he's got the pace, but I don't know whether he's consistent enough to do it.
They haven't got anyone else. That's the problem.
So
that is a problem.
It'll be interesting to see because, well, Max did it in 2021 when it was Bottas and Hamilton. So, we know he's good enough, but
I honestly think, though, as of this year, they've built up enough cushion already.
Yeah, 100%.
That Checo is safe in terms of that. He's safe. He's not going to lose them the championship.
No.
But yeah, I think with a car that is or not as competitive as it is now, or not as dominant, I should say, as it is now, that's when real questions will be asked. And I feel like Red Bull owe it to themselves to bring in one of those younger drivers that they're nurturing, and at least see if they're cut of the right cloth. Because I think we all know deep down that Checo is safe, but if what we want to happen comes true, you don't want someone safe. You can't afford someone safe.
I just don't know who Red Bull brings through, because I know Liam Lawson's being touted as the next one, but I don't think he goes straight into the Red Bull seat. I think he goes.
No, I don't think he will, and I think that's why they've made a big mistake bringing him or not bringing him in already. But I think both their Super 2 drivers, I could see them both coming into Toro Rosso next year, because they both look like they could be made of the right stuff, but we'll never know if we keep. I think De Vries has, unfortunately, the position he's been put in with the car he's been given isn't a great car for him to start in. I think it's hurt him. I think Sonoda's been all right, but by the end of the year, it's going to be, we know what we've got. There's no sort of spice there in terms of a future with Red Bull. And I don't think it would harm, like the results I would get would be much different if they brought in these two rookies anyway.
I'll tell you one thing. It's funny that the difference a couple of weeks makes, because at the end of the last race, I think it was Miami, it was all doom and gloom, and now I'm pumped up for the rest of the season. So,
mate, I didn't expect it from this weekend, and I stayed up for the race.
Did you? I couldn't do it. I woke up early this morning and watched it.
Qualifying jacked me up so much. I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch this race. I'm going to watch it live. And I was pumped about it as well. And I was praying for the rain when the rain sort of came on the radar, and it came. And I was like, this is what sort of, and it's a weird juxtaposition as well, because the Indy 500 was this morning, and that was also a great race, totally different reasons. But I was like, when the right chips fall in a Formula One race, you can get a bloody interesting event,
100%.
even at a track that I fucking despise.
Mate, I'll tell you, my morning, I woke up at 5. I watched the race as if it was, I didn't check my phone. I didn't go on Instagram or anything until 3 p.m. this afternoon because that's when I finished Indy. I didn't want to know any
Okay.
results.
Yeah. Okay.
So both races were excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I do it because I can't stay up anymore. I'm too old.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I've got a couple of years left on you, so I'll keep trying to do it as much as I can. I was actually going to do the all-nighter and wait for Indy, and I was like, I'll just pack it in the morning and go to work late, and then I realized I had a meeting booked at 9:30 this morning at Coogee, and I was like, there's no way I'm getting to Coogee with no sleep.
No way.
So I thought I'll bite the bullet, but yeah, I think what a great weekend.
Such a good weekend.
Shows, when Formula One is on, it can be on. I think it shows people like Anthony that he doesn't have to be pessimistic every week. We don't need a great race every week, but this is, I think, race 6 of the season, and we've had 2 memorable races of those 6. If we can get 8 memorable races out of the 23 this year, or 7, I think that's a pretty good conversion rate. And I'll leave you with this bit of wisdom that I heard from the new WTF one pod. What is it? I don't know what it's called. What's the new one called? Maddie and Tommy from
Tommy. Yeah.
their new show. So Tommy was saying in 2000, the 2016 F1 race at Monaco was the year that Danny Rick got robbed in the pit lane.
Yep.
From a massive team blunder, right? Everyone remembers that race. And there was no overtakes, I think, in the top 10 in that race, except through pit strategy. And yet everyone remembers the race. 3 races before that in China, I think it was a race where Danny Rick was sending it from well back.
I miss Red Bull Danny Rick. Far out.
That was the 3 races before it was the record of overtakes in an F1 race ever.
And no one remembers it.
No one remembers it. So it isn't all in the overtakes as much as we might think it is. It's in the moments. And I think races like that have, build bits in our memory, like little sort of like shelves in a library where we can go and pull moments from races. And I think that yesterday's race we will remember.
Well, you just gave me the name for this week's pod, mate. Monaco Moments.
Okay, you're welcome. I want some residuals.
I think it's a valid point though. Far out. Because everyone does remember 2016.
Yeah, and when he said that, I was sort of taken aback, and I was like, well, if you said to me what was the race with the most overtakes in F1 history, there is no way I would be like, 2016 China.
No way.
I actually think Max Verstappen won that race as well, if my memory serves me correct. But maybe you can check that up. I will check. I wouldn't mind seeing if I'm right. It'd be a good knowledge flex.
I reckon Max won, eh? No, Rosberg. Close. Max wasn't even on the podium, mate.
Wasn't he?
Oh, wait, was he? No, Kvyat.
Kvyat.
It was before they replaced Kvyat with Max. Oh.
Okay, then.
Remember, because Max won his first race ever. It was in 2016 in Spain. So it would have been this weekend. Look at that.
What the fuck do I know, eh?
We'll cut that bit.
No, it's all right. No worries.
Guys,
leave it there.
Thanks for listening. Keep liking, subscribing, all the stuff that Anthony says on a weekly basis. Keep interacting with the socials. And yeah, Joe, thanks for jumping on, mate. It's been good.
See you in a week.
You shall. Spanish Grand Prix. Love it.